Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode number 86 of FinalBossTV, your WoW and Game rating show. I will be your host. My name is Adam K, aka Bay, and today's show is Warlocks. We haven't been here in a while. We talked a little bit about Warlock stuff though in the beta, but since like the main episode we missed, obviously, and then a little bit of beta talk, and then to now, it takes about half a year to get through a full junket. So Warlords of Draenor, patch 6.2, tier 18, Warlock discussion. Sitting down with 3 guests today, because I felt like it's been long enough. I'll probably do 3 guests on some of the upcoming episodes too, maybe. We'll see about it. Comes down to convenience. There's no main after show today for the show, but of course we'll be plugging the guest's Twitter throughout the episode. And if you want to ask them questions, please feel free to bother them on social media. Because there's a raid right now or something that's really important. I don't know, Hellfire Citadel. Do you guys know about this chat room? I don't know, maybe. But our guests today are all new to the show. And without further ado, who are they exactly? This guy is supposed to steal my soul. There's Furty. Hello, sir. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. I'm a little tired, but no, I got some coffee and I'm ready to rock. So
how many cups of coffee have you consumed in the past week?
Well, I have 2 coffee makers. I have the cappuccino maker, and I have what I call the rating coffee pot, which makes like 12 cups of coffee at once.
Oh my!
And I drink about one of those pots a day, so a lot of coffee.
Yeah, that's a little bit. All right, because you guys have got 34 split runs going right now in Midwinter, right?
Yeah, we got a few. Sure.
Just a few. Just a few. Bringing in the math side of things and some Simcraft educational stuff, we have Gahddo. Hello, sir. How you doing?
I'm fine.
Not as much coffee? Maybe you needed some more coffee.
No, I've sworn off the coffee.
Oh.
He escaped.
Off the coffee. But you've definitely sworn in all the number crunching you've been doing.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get through plenty of that. A little bit, I can't imagine. Every other day is like, hey, this changed. Great. Yeah, that sigh is pretty telling. Also, we have Pyromancer on the show, who literally embodies Green Fire Warlock in real life. Hi, Pyro. What's up, man?
What's up? I'm doing pretty good, man. Excited to be here and be a part of this with these 2. So yeah, I'm ready to go.
Talk about Warlock stuff, apparently. Yeah.
Oh, dude, let's just talk about mages the entire time. That's what we're here for.
Oh,
right?
that's the real show. I'm sorry.
Let's talk about mages.
Talk about mages. So,
yeah, just mages, dude.
So Frost Mage is pretty good right now, I hear, right?
I don't know. I don't know anything about mages right now. I really don't know anything.
Way to drop the ball.
Come on, man. You bring up my segue, and then you poop on it.
Play Arcane, and you play Frost, I guess. I don't think you play Fire anymore.
On that note, though, I wanted to get into the kind of general going into tier 18. From your perspectives, from all the stuff you've done so far in normals and heroics and splits and PTR and whatnot, this feels like a single target range DPS focused tier outside of like 1.5 bosses. Am I wrong?
No, not at all. Like I feel like single target's always the best niche to have, right? Because there's always something that's the priority target. So I mean, if you're a spec that can deliver that kind of focus damage, then you're always going to be a desirable one. So
yeah, outside of like maybe Socrathar, obviously, because you got to AoE down the ghosts. I don't know, because AoE is kind of like a trap for ranged right now. Like if you're a pure DPS caster, like if you're a hunter, mage, warlock, then like tunneling certain targets is like really important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially as a warlock with how strong destructions burst single target is, like they're really good in a lot of encounters.
Yeah, it's definitely it. People ask me a lot on the show and on the live stream all week, like, well, what should I spec for this and what class should I be for that? And I was like, I mean, like melee seem to take care of all the AoE and the cleave because we both agility and strength have like really good trinkets for like AoE and cleave. And a lot of them can spec for AoE and cleave, so it feels like the melee are taking care of all that, and the ranged are taking care of all the single target. All the burst, the priority add stuff. So that's how it feels like in Hellfire. But when and why did you all go Warlock? And how long have you been Warlock? Like, plug what you do on the internet. Like, why should chat room care about you? I'm gonna go with Pyro first. We'll go back in reverse order.
I started actually maining Warlock at the start of MOP, though I had my Warlock back in Kata. And my Warlock actually wasn't my first tune, but I ended up maining it. I started off playing a Rogue, and I got really bored of melee really quick. So I switched to Warlock because I liked the concept of them, and I liked just kind of how tanky they seemed and how powerful they seemed at the same time. And I just got hooked. I mean, I like the lore behind Warlocks and everything, so yeah.
Fair enough. So you said you started Warlock when? What expansion?
I started Warlock at the beginning of MOP, so all through Mists up until now.
About 2.5, 3 years going on. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Gahddo, what about you, man?
I've got a pretty similar story. I started out sometime in TBC, picked up Warlock as an alt really quickly, but I didn't start maining it actively until Mists of Pandaria. First tier in Mists, I main swapped over to Warlock because they just looked so much fun. They were really tanky. They handled all of the mechanics on all of the fights amazingly. Still do.
So it's weird. Neither one of you lived in the Burning Crusade heyday of Shadow Bolt spam, and if you were the bitch Warlock, you got to put up Curse of Elements. So
Glad
Furty,
I didn't.
Yeah, right. So Furty, when did you start? What's your background in Warlock stuff?
Man, I kind of feel like a broken record. I started playing Warlock and MOP as well, but I also actually used to play Warlock and Encourage as well. But I mean that was a long time ago. But yeah, I mean I was attracted to the class for the same reason as everyone else. It was extremely OP, and at the time I was playing Fury Warrior, and my raid leader was like, "Hey man, you know we got a lot of Fury Warriors," and I played Shadow Priest for the longest time, so said, "Hey, maybe you want to play Warlock for the next tier," and yeah, that's when I rolled over. And I mean I've always preferred casters in general, so it was a pretty easy decision for me.
What if you couldn't play a Warlock? What would you play, Furty?
I would probably play Mage. Honestly, it's basically my second main. So yeah, I play Mage or maybe Shadow Priest or something like that.
What about you, Gahddo?
Rogue. It's my main alt right now. I just really love, being able to avoid every mechanic in the game.
I heard Feint's pretty good. I don't know about
just a little bit.
Pyro, what about you, man?
If I had to pick a caster, either Ellie Shaman or Mage, my main alt is actually Ellie Shaman, and I have a lot of fun playing Ellie Shaman because not only is it pretty simple, but they're so strong on cleave and AoE. But if I had to pick a melee, probably either Rogue or Feral. I like Feral a lot.
Feral Druid. All right,
there
you go. Feral Druid is like the single target destruction Warlock of melee, sort of. It's just sort of like, I can do a little bit AoE, but it's meh. Just gonna tunnel stuff down. Gotcha. So I guess I'm gonna jump ahead actually on this because I want to get to like the big elephant in the room right now. I mean, I want to break down what Warlords is like for you so far. I guess we're not gonna really talk about Tier 17 too much because it's basically gone. So, how have things been in Warlords up to this point for Warlocks? Like, has it been good, bad? Did the ability pruning from MOP till now go well? I mean.
It's a big one right here.
As you start laughing in the how is I'll go with Furty first. What have you thought so far of the transition?
It's kind of been a roller coaster, man. Like High Mall Warlocks were not. I mean, they were like a less than desirable mage, because mages sort of brought all the same niches, but with an extra cooldown and a little bit more mobility. And mages do jobs better, like they can juggle on Imperator and stuff. So early in the expansion, it was a bit of a rough ride for Warlocks in High Mall, but they were still absolutely viable. And then in Blackrock Foundry, we obviously saw Warlocks probably be like one of the strongest, maybe the top two, Hunters being the other one. So yeah, absolutely. I think that Warlock's been pretty strong overall, and we're going to see it be pretty strong in Citadel as well. So
right now, the laughing from the ability pruning and stuff like that. What all happened with Warlocks?
Oh God,
going like you get this one, Gahddo. So yeah, exactly. I mean, dot snapshotting probably being the largest thing that was removed. But even though, like, Feral Druid was what Pyro brought up, they get a lot of dot snapshotting. So I wonder why they don't have that for Affliction still, because it's like, really ruined the spec, arguably, from the community. Like, what do you think, though, Gahddo? How'd the ability pruning happen?
Well, for Affliction, it wasn't so much the ability pruning as the snapshotting change, but for Destruction, we lost the only instant cast spell that we had aside from Conflagrate, and that's a 12-second cooldown, I think, right now. So we basically lost the only ability that we can actually use while moving, and it made a lot of people feel really sad at the start of the expansion.
Yeah. Obviously they wanted to make the ranged movement meta like mean something again, like when to move, why to move, you know, when to plant, when to cast. But maybe a little too heavy-handed. You're talking about Fell Flame, I'm assuming, right? That's the name of the ability that you lost,
Yeah.
Yeah, what if Fell Flame had like a couple charges so you could actually like do something on the move a little bit? So you could like, you know, boom boom, but not like spam the hell out of it?
We threw out a bunch of ideas, but I think it just came down to like the developers sort of overreacted to how much mobility we had with Killjaden's Cunning being so good throughout the previous expansion, and they kind of just, instead of just fixing the problem, which was Killjaden's, they just nuked Fell Flame outright and left Destruction in a place where you either take Killjaden's or you just can't do anything for movement at all.
Let's not talk about Rain of Fire either.
Sure.
Well, you want to talk about Rain of Fire, Pyro? Talk about Rain of Fire. Go get into
ahead.
it. Yeah.
So, overall, I don't know. Like, the Warlocks have gone through a lot of changes this X-Pack, and one of the heaviest hitting changes, especially to Destruction, which is our primary spec now, was what they did to Rain of Fire. So they nerfed the damage a ton, and then they went, oh, well, you don't get embers from it anymore. And they nerfed the damage so much that not only is it not worth casting because you don't get embers, but you also don't do any damage with it either. So it's just kind of a spell that's there, and one of those things where some ads may be coming out so you don't have anything to do until they're there. Maybe you drop a Rain of Fire, but I was so mad about that because, like they said, they just took away all of our mobility, and like the only thing you can do while you move is either cast one of your Toucan Flag stacks, which usually you're probably using on cooldown anyway, so you probably won't have them, or you Rain of Fire, which is it's like you might as well not even cast Rain of Fire. It's awful.
It's still a cast time for Rain of Fire, right? So you get to actually it's not. Okay.
It's an instant cast.
Drop it.
It's a global, but
yeah, right. So
yeah.
I don't know why they didn't just like nerf the amount it gives you in embers, because it seems like if that's your only option.
That was the big. It wasn't actually the damage that was making it so good for on a single target from a math standpoint. It was actually that it just generated a lot more embers than Incinerate did for the mana that you invested in it. So you just got a lot more resource out of it for the value.
So then should it just have like a lesser... I mean, right now it has obviously a lesser amount of embers generated, 0.
Yeah.
But I mean, why didn't they just remove the amount of embers it generated? Maybe give like a set amount, like even like per overall cast. So you can only have down, one.
They talked a good bit about, things that they could do in 6.1 to help improve it, like making it so it only generates ember if it hits 3 targets or whatever. But it's never come to fruition since that point. And a big part of the issue was actually that at that time, Charred Remains wasn't a very good talent when they nerfed Rain of Fire. And without Rain of Fire or Charred Remains, the AoE just kind of doesn't really work because you can't sustain the AoE without the embers from Rain of Fire. So it was just like a combination of really bad things happening at that point.
You have to have like at least 4 or 5 targets for Fire and Brimstone to be self-sustaining before Rain of Fire. So there was a lot of instances where there was just no way, like you just couldn't use it.
Like the only case in Heimal where you could actually really use that ability or really destroy AoE at all was on Mythic Imperator in the last phase, just because there were like 20 ads.
So I guess it's been like this. It always feels like there's a weird ebb and flow. And of course, the world of perfect imbalance exists in pure DPS classes. Because, I mean, crap, look at hunters right now. I mean, look at how mages have evolved over the past 2 expansions. Do you think that's like an intentional point where they want to weave you around from, you know, spec A to B to C, back to B, then back to C, then back to A as they balance the game? Or is that like just something they just really can't get a fine handle on? Do you find yourself like changing specs based off of like gear and tiers a lot now, Furty? Like, is that intentional?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's intentional. I mean, for sure that you know, playing a pure sort of DPS class, you are definitely intended to make full use of the specializations. And I think like I sort of agree with Blizzard on that standpoint that it's maybe a little archaic for like everyone to sort of jump on the one spec bandwagon and be like, okay, oh, now it's nerfed. Like, are you kidding? Like, we have to play. Like, I don't like switching specs. I'm a Destro Warlock. Like, I think that if you play a pure class, then you have to accept that, you know, there is going to be that ebb and flow, and that you are going to have to be competent at least at all 3 specializations. And if you want to do top tier damage, then you're going to have to be able to play the top tier spec as the fight demands. So I think that's absolutely an acceptable demand from Blizzard.
Yeah, because I guess rogues get that too. Like, they just swapped around between subtlety and then combat. Now it's like assassination and combat, and like maybe subtlety, but like not really subtlety, so assassination. But I guess that's just the plight of the pure DPS class, because it's like a hybrid. Like, I just go through an ebb and flow of like, well, my single target is garbage, but my AoE is great. Well, now my AoE is garbage, but my single target burst is good. Like, that's all I feel. I don't have to change my actual spec. I won't go between elemental and enhancement because I don't like range DPS. So
I think with Warlocks, it's even more so through this tier, because we went from a position of playing pretty much Demonology, Demon Bolt, Spec, and High Maul. Then they nerfed that when we were in VRF and made it so we had to go like a pet spec for single target, which is the most mind-numbingly boring thing in the world. I actually found it probably more boring than Destruction and Affliction. And then I think it's true. I feel like Blizzard overlooked the power of Demonology, especially on AoE, because of our set bonuses and because of how powerful Cataclysm was in burst AoE on things like Thogar, for example. And it still allowed you, even with that setup, you still did okay boss damage. It wasn't like you sacrificed all your boss damage just to do this AoE. And especially because our set bonus allowed us to regenerate Hand of Gul'dan and Chaos Wave stacks from our corruption, I think I kind of feel like they overlooked how powerful that was. So.
And the regen, the chance to add charges, wasn't even the part that was really overpowered. It was just getting that extra third charge, giving you 3 Chaos Waves, 66% more.
You could just pull them up for whatever was coming, and then just blow all 3 instantly. Whatever you're hitting is gone.
Well, it changes the way that you approach like AoE or cleave. Like, there's definitely more reward to letting things pile up, or to handling a lot of ads at once, as opposed to maybe cleaving down stuff evenly or in smaller packs.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, the only, like, that's why I said like AoE is sort of a weird thing going into tier 18, because I feel like Blizzard like has learned that at least to some degree, because only like Archimonde sort of has like packed AoE, and then like Sorcathar, because it's not. Well, yeah, I guess packed it, but that's almost more of a melee cleave orientation. Because if you're ranged, you want to kill the priority ad that you had to kill, like the stupid
definitely.
like the Talon Priest or the Dread Raven, stuff like that. And it's a trap on Hellfire Assault to AoE, because that's actually bad, because you never want to push multiple terrors at once. So, and ranged will be the ones that kill the siege engines. So it definitely feels like balance points almost come down to, like, depending on how the tier and the gear gives you, that's almost how you have to then relearn a class if you're a pure DPS. Because it changes a lot of stuff. Like, your mentality from one tier to the next, like, changes a lot. Just flips over. I'm doing a little hand flipping over thing. But yeah. So then, looking at tier 18, Furty, what do you think from your perspective? Because you're going to be doing Mythic progression at, like, a lower gear level. Because the ramping gear level, Mythic will be arguably a little harder than it's been before, I wonder, because bosses actually get stronger as you go deeper into Mythic progression, and you don't really get better gear until you kill that boss. How is the range DPS hierarchy looking like for you, from like a balance standpoint? Like, what's like the top 3 and then like the bottom rest? Like, how is it going to be? It might be spec to spec dependent too.
Yeah, I think that the the classes that bring the most flexibility are typically the classes that we value the most, especially classes that, obviously looking at the end boss, we can say, hey, like this class is going to excel on the end boss because that's, that's going to be where the meat and potatoes of the progression happens. So right now, I mean, range that are probably the top 3, I would say, are Hunter, Mage, and Warlock in no particular order because they have a lot of flexibility. Warlock and Hunter both have very good ways of dealing with things like, with ads, and our mages do as well, right? Mages are able to put out, as Arcane, like very, very focused damage and high consistent damage. So all three of these classes deal with things like ads well, and usually those are sort of the crux of the fight, where it's like, boss damage is really important and all, but there's usually one part of the fight that it's like, if you can't get past that part of the fight, then you can't kill it. And everything else is kind of irrelevant as long as you can deal with that part of the fight. So we typically value classes that excel in those roles and have the flexibility to do that, on every fight if they can.
Right. So if you can't, that's the weird thing, because you didn't mention like certain classes that have like almost like incredible niches, like Elemental Shaman, Shadow Priest. Like, unless you have the ability to multi-dot to gain better single target, or the ability to cleave into Earthquake into then being able to, like, focus and not have to worry about anything else, it does put a disadvantage on certain ranged classes at that
that's
level.
The flip side, right? Is that if you play, or if you have hybrids in your raid, and that's why it's hard to stack things like Shadow Priests for progression, is because if they're not good on a fight, then they're bad. Like, there's usually no middle ground for the hybrid classes. Like, they don't have a way that they can continue to be useful unless their niche is fulfilled. So,
I feel like that's really prominent with Ellie Shaman. Like playing on my Ellie Shaman, Zul Harak, man, that's a fight where your AOE and your cleave is significantly benefiting your single target.
Of course,
like your earthquakes and things like that on the imps and stuff like that really help you. But outside of that niche or niche, however you want to pronounce it, you're not that good.
No, it really is. And that's just sort of how classes are certainly are balanced a bit. And then at a higher end level, when you're looking at that small curve, you need to plan for it. Whereas if you're outside of that like top 10 to 15 world stage, it doesn't matter as much. You can kind of get around that because you'll eventually get more gear built up and you'll actually be able to punch through those walls that other people that are there before you can't do. But that's just how class balance sort of works at that high end. So, I mean, Blizzard does not balance for mythic top 0.5 percenters. They balance around the 50% mark for heroic rating. So that's where it like matters more. But for people that are really pushing that bleeding edge, it's different. Always different up there. So, but that leads me into the patch 6.2 dev Q&A and the nerf heard round the world.
All right, I'm out.
I'm out. Literally this lead.
I guess I get to take this one then.
Now, at first, they basically said demonology is dead. Ian dead. Watcher. But that's actually not the case. And I really want to drill this into the Warlock community, and hopefully the chat room will propagate this to their guildies and their raid members and everywhere else on the internet. That, like, after they then nerfed the tier 18 sets for Affliction, demonology is now better than Affliction, and destruction is like the top dog if you're a destruction beast. So now it's like demonology is fine. Yeah? Like
I would say it's in a healthier place than it was last year, because last year it was just like, bring 3 demonology warlocks to your raid, and then all of the fights with ads are just now not a problem in any way.
Right.
But a lot of people overlooked the indirect buffs that we got to a lot of spells from them increasing mastery value a lot, because they just look at the flat 25% nerf and things like Chaos Wave that got hit really hard. But we also got pretty big buffs to things like Cataclysm and Immolation Aura and Demon Bolt, which is, I think a lot of Demonology Warlocks are happy right now that Demon Bolt is back top dog single target where it really should be. It's the hardest talent to use there.
Most fun too.
It's more fun than the normal demo rotation. I think.
I hate both of you so much.
Really? You don't like Demon Bolt?
Why? Come on.
I don't know. I kind of disagree on that point. I find Demon Bolt to be like a sort of a gross simplification of the traditional demonology playstyle. Like, it's really comes down to sort of RNG, whether you do well or poorly, and there is definitely room for optimization, right? Like there is with any spec, but
Sure.
I felt like in the past, you know, the big swing on damage was whether you crit or not is your demon bolt, and
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
That's annoying, but I also think that it's really good to have the niche back for Demon Bolt, particularly in this raid, because there are a lot of fights where Demon Bolt is just better mechanically than having a pet out. It's just like a lot of big ads that you need to kill really quickly, and Demon Bolt is just like the perfect talent in the game for that, because you can front load all of your damage into like a 7-second window, and it does sort of simplify the spec, but it also gives you a lot more control over it, which is, I guess, what I like the most about it.
I do like the niche, honestly. I feel like that's cool, and I feel like even last year in BRF, after the Demon Bolt nerf, people undervalued the power of that niche. Like there was definitely applicable use on fights like Blast Furnace or something. If you were trying to meet checks and you couldn't meet the single target damage, Demon Bolt was absolutely a solution to that. Like even in the nerf state.
Well, that was, I think, the main issue that Watcher wanted to get across in the interview is that, again, because the mentality of Blizzard basing around like the 50 percentile in heroic raiders, I wonder if they had a lot of analytics or a lot of feedback on the fact that Demonology Warlocks, if you could play it well, you have basically 3 different like forms, because you have not in demon form, then you have meta, and then you have either Demon Bolt for single target or Chaos Wave for AoE. And I wonder if people were a little overwhelmed like how much they could do, and they could basically adapt to any situation on the fly as Demonology Warlock, which I'm sure as like really like player that understands all this stuff, you could do it and you're like, yeah, amazing. But having a spec that is good at everything usually leads to badness, or a bad propagation of balance in that class, because then it devalues every reason to go Destruction or Affliction. Because if Affliction is supposed to be a single target like tunnel spec, and Destruction should be a burst spec that can like have cleave AoE, but you can do both of that as Demonology, why go other specs?
Destro's getting to a place, in my opinion, where it's going to be like that, because the thing that I felt separated Destruction from Demonology, aside from the pure power differentials between the classes in BRF, was the fact that you could cast your most powerful AoE spell as Demonology while you were moving, and Destruction with the class trinket is just so far ahead of the other 2 specs on pretty much every single fight, unless you're just purely padding as Demonology, that it's going to be at the state where you're going to be doing very, very good single target damage on things like Gore Fiend. When he goes into his phase, you're going to be doing very, very good burst damage.
Sure, yeah.
And you're going to have the versatility because of how Charred Remains works, where when AoE comes out, you're going to be doing good at that too. So
there's a big problem with Destruction and Demonology specifically, where the way our talents and specs are set up, those 2 specs, if one of them is tuned slightly better than the other, it's generally just always better, because they both handle all of the mechanics in the game really effectively. The primary difference is really like Demo is better at movement, and then they both have awesome ways to handle AoE, cleave, single target, burst. So whichever one is slightly better generally just becomes the status quo.
Yeah, it's there. I mean, Destro has always been one of the greatest sort of jack of all trades. Like, can pretty much handle any fight type. It does good burst. It does pretty good sustained. It has good like what I like to call like fingertip burst. Like you have ads like Spore Shooters or something that like target switching, kind of like hunters have. You can instantly convert your damage to meaningful damage without cooldowns or like waiting for any kind of like stacks or. Whereas Demo has like a very, very vast toolkit, but the damage is a little bit more. Comes in bursts, right? Like you need to sort of plan around and be reactive to things, and so you don't always have full control of when the burst is there. Whereas Destruction sort of handles those things really well. So when it gets even a little bit ahead, like it starts to dominate on many fight types because it is that much more flexible.
Which it's just weird from like a hybrid perspective, because I always get asked like, where is Elemental right now? Where is Enhancement right now? And Enhancement's like top 3 AoE and good burst, but crappy single target and cleave. And Elemental's the exact opposite. Like great cleave, good single target sustain, burst, and AoE, You kind of gotta finagle it a bit, but you have like a target amount where you go over too much AoE and you fall off compared to other classes as an elemental shaman. But that's how elemental enhancement have been all expansion. But as a pure DPS class, if you can do that all with one spec, the other two specs are dead, and that's bad game design. That's bad player player interaction with playing other classes. And if you feel like you're playing the other spec of that class, I love being a frost mage, all of a sudden I'm garbage. It's not a really good thing to have for players. So I guess it's a hard balance with pure DPS classes.
It really is. Honestly, it's quite a juggling act, and I don't envy that job. The people that have to do that, because right. I mean, no matter what you do, you're gonna make everyone mad, and
yeah, right.
I mean, so it's tough for sure.
You wanted me to bring up? I wanted to touch real quick too. Obviously, we talk about snapshotting is gone. Soul swap was a thing that I wanted to touch on real quick.
Oh,
yeah,
so gross.
Yep. You want me to start that one off?
What was that,
Go
Furty?
ahead.
What was that, Furty? What was that?
Rest in peace, man. Rip Soul Swap.
So, was that a bad move, do you all think, on Blizzard's part to remove Soul Swap?
Definitely. No, they didn't remove it. They added a cost to it. It now costs 1 soul shard to use the ability.
Yeah, and you only get 4. So.
And the fact of the matter is, without snapshotting, the ability to copy your dots off of a target onto another target really just doesn't do much of anything at all. You get agony stacked up a lot faster, but that's it. There's no value to it. And with the soul shard cost on it, it's just you're better off just applying your dots and then using that to apply haunt to the new target.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
It's very clunky, right? Because when Affliction, before they nerfed the 2-piece and you had sort of the infinite drain soul, you could keep it going until the next Dark Soul, you had a lot of extra soul shards to spend that you could use for soul swap, but it did feel very awkward, I think is probably the best way to describe it. If we're talking from just a purely sort of, I guess more of a lore perspective or something, you're looking at it okay, this is supposed to be the granddaddy of multi-dot. This is supposed to be the niche that I excel at is 3 target and single target and that kind of thing. And then you have classes like Shadow Priest that can just, pain. Okay, I have infinite orbs. And then you have Warlock where you're just constantly recasting dots and they're not even really doing that much damage. And and you don't have any way to spread those dots efficiently. And then you're limited by the Soul Shard resource on top of that. So that felt like a very awkward change to me. Maybe it's definitely possible to balance that numerically so that Soul Shard is worth it. In fact, it actually was worth it on 4+ targets to swap versus Soulburn Haunt, but it feels like a failing of gameplay to me.
It also comes back to, at the same time as them adding that, they also they capped the number of shards that we get to one target. Which means we don't get any more shards as targets get added, and we have to use shards on the other targets, and you just end up being resource starved to begin with, and then you also have to spend them for soul swap. So it's there's no good way to go about that, and the thing with the dots not hitting hard enough, it's a weird topic because if they buff Affliction's dots even just a little bit compared to where they are right now, because they're pretty strong right now, they'll just start dominating fights like Council in terms of raw DPS. There's a big problem in balancing Affliction. If they buff the dots directly, then every target added compounds that buff. So they don't really have a good way to balance the spec other than buffing Drain Soul, which
I guess I'm
sack spec. Ooh.
I'm not sure in this realm of, in my first opinion, it's like Necrotic Plague, Death Knights, where in a realm where you can have a fully stacked dot that you can just spread to everyone and make it last indefinitely for no cost other than a rune cooldown. Why would they remove the ability or put a big hindrance on the ability, roughly, with Soul Swap to move just one set of dots from one target to the other?
It was an overreaction because in Siege of Orgrimmar, they made a change to Soul Swap, and it got really, really overpowered really fast.
Ridiculous.
It was one of the most broken mechanics in the game ever, honestly. Like the snapshotting in combination with Soul Swap, like people were doing crazy things like using Dragon Wrath on pull to snapshot dots,
that was awesome.
and then Soul Swap them to 4 targets, and it's just like, okay.
But that's the thing I'm wondering, because with the snapshotting dead, and you can only move one set of dots with Soul Swap anyway.
Because
I don't.
They added the Soul Swap cost in beta for this expansion, which is the weird. It felt really wrong because they had removed snapshotting, and it's just the problem was solved with snapshotting getting nuked, and then they also added the cost, and it was just like, I guess I'm not going to use this ability ever again.
I think the biggest flaw with Affliction right now, especially with what they did to Soul Swap, is not even a power problem. There's always going to be a spec that's not top. Like, that's just how it is. But I think it's a gameplay and flow flaw as far as how the spec feels. Like, you're just manually casting your dots pretty much onto everything if you're playing Affliction anymore. And then, especially when you tie in set bonuses and trinkets, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually, but it makes the spec feel really... It doesn't feel like Affliction. It just doesn't. So
yeah, it's definitely like, I feel like a very egregious degradation of sort of the gameplay fluidity. I always thought in MoP that even though it was overpowered, I thought that Affliction was, possibly the most fluid spec in the game. You had like maybe 5 buttons, right? You have like your dots and Soul Swap and Haunt, and that's pretty much it. But combined with the way those abilities interacted with each other, and combined with the Soul Swap, the snapshotting mechanic and whatnot, it kind of offered one of the highest skill cap specs in the game. Like, so it was a spec that was easy to understand and I think easy to pick up, but it was hard to master. And I think that's where like their gameplay was the strongest. And now it's just like this mess of a spec that's really not interesting in the slightest and not fun. And yeah,
I think a lot of the fun aspect of it gets completely killed with the RNG of Nightfall procs. It's just, when it's capped to 1 target and it ties so much of your DPS to just pure RNG, it feels unrewarding, because you'll have pulls where you'll have like a 50% uptime on Soulburn Haunt playing perfectly just because you have no shards to apply it at all. And then other pulls you'll have Soulburn Haunt up the entire fight and shards to just throw haunts at random targets.
Yeah, that's between DPS and healing. That's the same argument that a lot of people hear, is that depending on what kind of RNG you deal with, it's either very like opportunistic and you can take advantage of it, but if you can't control it and it's like a mechanic that revolves around a resource, no DPS or healer likes to have like, I can't use it right now, and it's gone. Or you have too much of it and you can't use it efficiently. So that's
where the gameplay thing comes in, because the 4 set currently, right, has you given infinite haunt basically. When your Dark Soul's active, as long as you're drain souling the target, haunt will constantly be refreshed to the full duration. So you have this resource that is basically you can really only spend it on haunt on single target, and I guess you can use it on Soul Swap on multi-target. But before they nerfed the set bonus, you had this issue where you were literally capped on shards for like the first 60 seconds of the fight. There was like nothing you could spend them on unless you just wanted to spam haunt, which was an option, but it's very awkward. Like, and again, in my opinion, a huge failing on gameplay design. Just this very, very clunky spec that they can't decide exactly what they want to do with. So
it's funny because one of the only fights that I would even consider playing Affliction on is probably Hellfire Council, and even on progression, I won't be. I'll be playing Destruction. And it's funny because the set bonuses and the trinket reduces the duration of your dots, so the power of them is increased because they're shorter duration. But your set bonus also helps reinforce wanting to drain soul to keep haunt up and to keep your Dark Soul going. But on a fight where it's multi-target like that, because of what the trinket's doing to your dots, you're having to refresh them so much you don't really get that much time to drain soul. So your set bonuses almost become useless. There was a time when we were PTR testing and we had the trinkets, but we weren't even using our new set bonuses on PTR because there was no point. There was no extension because you could kind of drain soul. You could weave drain soul in, but your dots were running out so fast that it was almost not even worth.
Yeah.
So
exactly. It's just like very strange choices in gameplay design. So
I mean, even you look at a spec like Demo, and there's really awesome synergy between the sets and the class trinket for a spec that we play this tier, and then you look at Affliction, and seemingly they just didn't talk about the interaction between the two at all for that spec. They directly oppose each other. One makes you hit Drain Soul, and the other one makes you spend time refreshing dots. And you can't have both.
Yeah, that sounds like a conflict of literal gameplay style interest for the player. You can't choose. Yeah, you can't do it. Fair enough. Anything else about the Three Warlock specs you want to talk about in that sort of roundabout? Before I get on to some stat stuff, and we'll talk about masteries and attunements and get a little more mathy. No? Anything? Cat?
He wants attention, man. He's
sure. So going in this order, we're gonna do Affliction, Demonology, Destruction, both all 3 times for this sort of this discussion. So I'll start with Affliction first. Mastery is Potent Affliction, so you can increase damage of Agony, Corruption, a stable Affliction by X%. And Attunement is Eradication, where you get 5% more haste. What is the stat priority for Affliction if you're going to still play it in Tier 18? Where does like this, then this? Because now the whole 70, 30, 60, 40 secondary stat thing is a lot more important to make sure you're putting on the right gear. Or does that even matter as much?
It matters quite a bit for Affliction. In particular, Affliction has a lot of stats that are just not very good. And the 2 primary stats you want to focus on are Mastery and Haste. And most of the community will agree that Mastery is better because it does more damage for like ad burst. Like if you have to swap to a target really fast, the dots don't have time to tick long enough for haste to actually have any value. So it's basically Mastery, then haste, and then whatever you can get. Versatility is obviously the worst stat for like everything ever, but crit and multi-strike are about the same. Versatility is dead last by a mile.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Gahddo, but Mastery definitely pulls ahead in multi-target, and haste is a better stat on single target. You generally, I mean, it was before.
Haste single target value is sort of tied to pets a bit, because pets don't benefit from Mastery. So if you have a pet going, haste value goes up, and as you add more targets, Mastery does increase, but it's not as much as people think. It's really mostly just for the burst.
If you can get Mastery and haste, get Mastery and haste. So
ignore everything else on everything.
Yeah, just get that.
Fair enough. Demonology then. Mastery is Master Demonologist. Shocker. Increases all damage done by you and your demon by XX%, and then further increases all damage done by Touch of Chaos, Chaos Wave, Doom, Immolation Aura, and Soulfire while in Metamorphosis, also by XX%. And then your attunement is Demonic Tactics, 5% more mastery from all sources. So, I'm going to guess real quick here. I'm going to say Mastery is probably good for Demonology.
Just a little bit.
Yeah?
I mean, they buffed it by a third, and then they buffed it by 25%. So it's a little bit good.
So
in other words, just stack versatility. That's what I'm
Is that what you do? Oh, damn.
Oh, yes.
No, please, God, nobody take
him
seriously right now. Do not listen to this man. Just get as for Demo, the secondary stats are all really balanced aside from Mastery. It's just the clear front runner. Get whatever item has Mastery on it. That's the item you should be using for Demo. The other stat doesn't really matter at all. Haste is a little bit better for single target, but they're all dead even for multi-target stuff. So,
wow, that's pretty flat. I don't know. Is that? I guess that's easy to know, I suppose. But again, Demonology's too difficult, though, guys. Remember, too difficult.
Yeah, I mean,
Chaos Wave's too difficult. Summoning your demons too difficult. Like, all right.
And then Destruction Mastery is Fiery Apocalypse or Green Fiery Apocalypse, as Pyro is looking at in real life right now.
Green fire all day, every day.
Now, Fiery Apocalypse increases the damage of Immolate, Incinerate, and Conflag by X%. So it's not a double integer base, it's just a single integer base. And then Devastation, which is your 2 minutes, 15% more critical strike from all sources. Crit pretty good for destruction, maybe? It also double dips, of course, with Chaos Bolt. They added that in.
No.
Mastery.
It's not. Okay.
It's better than multi-strike and haste. It's a very tiered thing for Destro. It's mastery, crit, multi-strike and haste, and then versatility dead last. Crit is... People like to link like Simcraft outputs of their single target patchwork DPS and like, oh, crit's the best stat. And just like, if you add a second target ever, it's just like mastery wins by 1.5 miles. Yep. It works better for everything but patchwork by a lot. And like they're close enough single target, it really won't affect your DPS at all. So
even now that Charter Remains is favored, right? Like mastery is just like. I mean, if you consider just like the simplest of the math, it's like 1% mastery is 3% damage on Chaos Bolt, and 1% crit is 1% damage on Chaos Bolt. It's pretty easy to see why mastery is
70 to 80% of your damage is chaos. So,
yeah. Okay, that sounds pretty definitive. So it really seems like all 3 Warlock specs though are mastery.
Yep.
And then
has been that way for a long time.
It's pretty convenient. It just means you can go with mastery and haste or mastery and crit and do whatever you want.
Right. Now, that seems to me like actually a good thing because of the whole like swapping around your gear now and your set bonus changes automatically and all this kind of stuff is a pure DPS, and especially the ebb and flow we've talked about for the first half of the show. The first half an hour anyway is all about like you have to kind of change your Warlock spec based on the patches, based on the set bonuses and stuff. So, okay. So, super weak stat, obviously, versatility, lowest stat for all 3. And so focusing on gear in your tier 18 set now, you got the Death Rattle Regalia.
Yes.
So we'll do Affliction, Demonology, Destruction again in order.
Yep.
And 2-piece for Affliction is each time your Drain Soul ticks, now have a 10% chance to extend the duration of Dark Soul by 2 seconds.
It's 10,
And then,
this is disgusting. And
then the 4 pieces when Dark Soul Misery is active, your Drain Soul damage refreshes the duration of Haunt on the target.
Yep.
So it was really good, and Affliction was like, woo, best Warlock spec. And they cut off 20% from the 2-piece bonus, which arguably...
It might have been just slightly too good. I mean, the set was
it was pretty good.
You got permanent Dark Soul and permanent Haunt on a single target, and it was like 30% damage increase. So maybe a little bit, but the 10% thing, even if it's okay-ish numerically, which it's a little underpowered, but a lot of people felt that it should have been 20% at 1 second instead. Because right now, it's just like, you can go an entire 20-second drain Dark Soul without seeing any procs at 10%.
You can go 40. You can use Archimonde's Darkness second charge and not see a proc.
It's just really RNG having it at 10% for 2. I think 20 at 1 would have been better. It's the same mathematically, give or take.
And this still goes back on the fact that Affliction already has built-in RNG.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
you also have
I've talked about this with a few Warlocks, but you know, at least some of the feeling amongst us is that it maybe could have been left at 30%. I mean, it was a little broken on single target, but at the same time, in a mythic environment and even in like any raid environment, actually. That's a choice. It's entirely reliant on Drain Soul, right? And how many fights do you have that you can channel Drain Soul uninterrupted for 2 minutes? Like, it just doesn't happen realistically. There's maybe 2 fights, like Zakun maybe.
They've had like a history of balancing Affliction set bonuses since the start of MOP, purely around single target.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure every tier that we've had to date has just sucked for Affliction as you add a just one it's added and the value of the bonus goes poof, because a lot of the time they tie things into Drain Soul and then it's just like, guess it doesn't work anymore. But
you have to consider that the 4-piece also feeds off of the 2-piece, and that your when Dark Soul's up, your Drain Soul and refreshes your Haunt. So when the 2-piece is being less, in my opinion, awful, and you're trying to keep Haunt up, like it's a lower haunt up time throughout the fight as well. But I kind of thought that was a little overpowered because having haunt up for 20 seconds without having to spend any shards means you can do different things in your opener with your shards, which added a little bit of diversity to it. But still, what they did to the 2-piece, they actually nerfed it twice. It was actually
right. Okay.
Yeah, it used to be 30% for
30
5
at
seconds.
3 seconds. It was 5 seconds for like 1 second in the first piece.
And they're like,
"Whoops, bad idea."
So yeah.
So then, I mean, do you think that it should have stayed at a 30% chance, but maybe extended by 1? Because then you'd kind of get like a couple extra seconds out of each charge, but not like an obscene amount. Because right now you can get 0.
I did a lot of math on like varying combinations of like seconds and percent chance for it. 30% at 1 was pretty good. 20% at 2 was also all right if you're balancing around multiple targets, which they probably should be at this point. But to explain in the simplest terms how bad the Affliction 2-piece is right now, on a single target, it's almost not worth dropping Mythic Tier 17 4-piece to get full heroic Tier 18 4-piece as Affliction. It's a dead wash. Like, you don't gain anything.
Damn. Yeah, and that's the weird thing I thought people were gonna run into, is that we're gonna see like certain classes like Warrior for a long time, like will just keep Mythic Tier 17 and not care until Mythic Tier 18 gear was dropping for set bonuses. Yep. Which
it's very much the case for Affliction.
You know that's a bad design from Blizzard when players are intentionally trying to avoid certain things that you put into the game, like a tier set.
Yeah.
Like, you know that you designed it bad when people don't even want it. Like, who doesn't want a new set bonus?
The worst part is, not only is a Tier 17 set bonus just better numerically as a bonus, it's also a lot easier to play with because it reduces the RNG a lot. Because our 4-piece from Tier 17 makes it so that Nightfall has a higher proc chance.
Sure.
So you go back. It helps a lot with the horrible feeling that Affliction has right now of being just terrible RNG. And once you remove that and add in these new bonuses, it's just like, well, now we have more RNG from our resource, and we also have 2 set bonuses that are complete RNG. So,
so then, if you're gonna play Affliction to move on, which off piece do you pick up? If you're gonna use the 4 set, is there one off piece that you pick up? What piece?
Generally, for all of the specs, it's going to be something off of Archimon, just from the item level. For Affliction, happens
and how
to
the
be
stats are weighted.
But if you can't get no, there are 2 cloth off pieces off of Archimon. It's the helm and the shoulders. For Affliction, shoulders are probably your better bet. But if you can't get them off of Archimon because he's the last mythic boss or whatever, the Manaroth legs are probably your second best bet.
Okay. So Demonology then, middle of the road now for your classes. So your 2-piece bonus, Soulfire, increases damage done by your demons by 3% for 15 seconds up to 5 stacks. Okay. And your Molten Core proc equal a 30% chance to summon a demon from the void to assist you.
Which is very powerful.
So it's like the mage set, technically. You just summon a demon where you don't summon like Arthas and Jaina and whatnot. But
hey man, I'm seeing a pattern. The druid set summons a fairy dragon. Wow.
Yeah, you think maybe
the fire mage set summons a phoenix.
I don't know how it is on live, but when I was PTR testing the demo set bonuses, I got so many imps. I couldn't run out of fury. Like, I would literally sit there in meta spamming Soulfire because I was playing Demon Bolt spec. Spamming Soulfire in meta, and my Fury won't go down. So I'm just sitting Fury capped. I'm like, just waiting on that Demon Bolt debuff.
See, now I kind of wonder, to interject on that, I almost wonder if Demonology Warlock, because they were going to like over nerf it and they wanted it to die, and they wanted to rework it probably in 7.0, even though Warlock's just got to rework again. I almost think the Demonology Warlock should be like Moonkin form. You just turn into the Metamorphosis Demon, and you're the demon the whole time. Why have this ebb and flow?
That'd be sick.
But like, obviously they tune the damage down and rework stuff, so it's not like you're wicked overpowered the whole time, obviously. But you'd always be the demon, whereas like a Moonkin is always the Moonkin. Why isn't the demon Warlock always the demon?
what do you two, Gahddo and Furty? Because I'm just wondering, what do you think about them if they were to make Metamorphosis a cooldown? Like
I don't know, man.
The grunts.
I might be in the minority.
I'm just wondering.
I thought the Blackrock Foundry iteration of Demo was like perfect, and I don't really want anything else from that spec. But
that's it was so good. Strong, dude. It was so good. Yeah.
It was overpowered, but like mechanically, it just felt so good. And
I agree.
I understand from a developer's standpoint that they want to cut back some of the complexity in the spec, because it is a spec. Once you play it a good bit, it's not that hard to get down, but for a beginning player, it's just horribly unforgiving to try and pick up demonology.
Yeah.
And people are going to hate me for saying this, but I'm actually happier when demonology is more complex, and I felt that it was in tier 17 because we had a really awesome set bonus that added another layer to your Hand of Gul'dan usage. The extra charge let you do really interesting stuff on single targets with like rolling it for 4 Hand of Gul'dan casts in a row, just like 40 seconds of Hand of Gul'dan if you actually learned how to master it properly.
And it also had you using corruption in places where you might necessarily not before as well, to try to get those Hand of Gul'dans back. So
yeah, no, I don't know. Like I don't like the idea of the spec changing. I really like the way it plays now, but I mean, that's sort of the two roads I see them going down, honestly. I see it being a permanent state, or because I think that's where a lot of the confusion lies for most players, like what the duality of the two different forms. You know, when is my spell better to use? Because it's all proc dependent. Like you only have so many charges of Hand of Gul'dan and Chaos Wave, and you only have so many Soulfire procs. And you know, which form do I use them in? And usually the answer is not it's not 100%. Like it's like, okay, in this situation you do this, but you know, if there's 4 ads you do this, but I mean, if you have low fury and there's 5 ads, then you probably don't. You know, it's just like infinite amounts of considerations to take, and it's very overwhelming. If you understand the principles of it, you can make those considerations on the fly very easily. But if you're not understanding the why behind the spec, which is, you know, pretty complicated, then you're going to have a lot of trouble, and you're really going to struggle with it. So I can definitely see the ideological change behind the nerf. So,
and then you go ahead, Gahddo.
I was just gonna say we should probably jump back to the set bonuses at some point.
Yeah.
I was just.
I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, good, bad, ugly. I mean,
the 2-piece is. It's kind of dependent on the 4-piece, so it's not that great as a solo set because you don't really get that much of your damage from pets right now playing Demon Bolt. But once you get the 4-piece, it's actually they're pretty strong set bonuses single target, and they have a really good interaction with our class trinket because the wild imps we get from the class trinket get buffed from the 2-piece. So. That's just 15% more value on our class trinket right there. So
the class trinket also lets you keep up the Soulfire buff like infinitely. Like there's no chance of you not having enough Soulfires to sustain that buff because the imps just infinitely proc the Soulfire.
Which is
sit
weird.
At 10.
Yeah, well, they say they got a nerf demonology, but then they give you basically a 15% passive increased damage to your demons, and then give you a chance to summon more demons, and then if you have the we'll get to the Archimon trinket in a moment, but then you get to summon more demons with Hand of Gul'dan.
Oh, yes. It's just a matter of, like, the demons that we do have really aren't that great right now. So even if you're running Demonic Servitude, it's still only, like, 40% of your damage is coming from pets. So that 15% gets reduced to 40% of that immediately.
I see.
It seems OP on paper when you just look at it, but when you look at the actual math behind it, it's strong, but it's definitely not overpowered.
Okay, fair enough. But still good. Again, same off pieces, though, for the 4 set. Try to get the shoulders or helm off Archimon.
Shoulders or helm off Archimon are the clear winners for all of the specs. If you can't get that for Demo, it's Manaroth legs, probably.
Yeah, I definitely like helm for Demo. I feel like when you shift towards Demon Bolt, it's nice to have the crit, and the haste is not as important as you get the 4 set, because like we talked about, you're just swimming in the fury, right? So, and haste is very much the value of it. A lot of it comes from being a generator stat, although the increased ticking of doom and stuff is nice. But definitely, yeah, the helm is just like disgustingly good. So.
440 mastery on Mythic.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, again,
the split is like 25% to 75%, quite
Yeah.
literally, for crit to mastery on that helmet. So
Wild.
it's pretty imbalanced.
I
mean,
guess it's irrelevant to say Mythic because
exactly.
once you get the Mythic one, it doesn't matter. But the heroic one, even still.
Correct. Yeah. Because people think because Mythic gear means you're on farm anyway. Who cares? Yeah. Granted, Mythic gear matters if there's another tier, but we don't know there's another tier in this expansion, so it's like leveling gear maybe. We don't know yet. So there's a lot of possibilities that you get there and you can make your BIS list, sure, but for those that are your progression rating, So Destruction then, as the current quote-unquote top dog of everything in Tier 18, you've got your 2-piece set, which reduces the cast time of your Chaos Bolt by 0.5 seconds, which is that's
pretty huge.
And then increases its damage by 2%, which I don't even know 2%.
Yeah.
And then
I mean it's a damage buff, so I'll take it.
Yeah, and then your 4-piece is your Chaos Bolt has a 12% chance to not consume embers.
Yep. Which I personally think is a pretty lame 4 set, and I say that
I hate it.
Yeah.
I say that because it's almost an exact opposite of what we had in PRF, where Immolate had a % chance to regenerate a full ember. It's like now when you spend an ember, there's a chance to not get one. So it's like.
To be fair, I think it's infinitely better than the Tier 17 2-piece because it's not like, oh hey, I went from 1 ember to I'm capped now and I just lost I lost a proc. You're generally not gonna like waste the proc that much unless you're looking at AoE, but it's a little bit annoying to be like, I'm already casting an Incinerate and now I have this Ember because I didn't realize my Chaos Bolt was going to be free this time. I think a lot of people would have been a lot more happy if it was like a proc to make the next one free.
Correct.
So that you have a buff
so
and you
know
can see
it's happening.
The thing that made it kind of nice in some situations, though, especially opener, considering Destruction's opener is so crucial with your timings and your precast and everything, is that you could be in the middle of casting a Chaos Bolt and instantly have another Ember generate on top of it. So you would already know, hey, I'm going to be casting an extra Chaos Bolt, whereas the set bonus now, when your Chaos Bolt cast is over, then you'll know whether or not it was gone. You could know preemptively beforehand, and I think that's probably one of the only good things about it.
I think the 4-piece could have used some mechanical changes, but overall it's not bad for a set bonus, and numerically they're both really good right now. There's some other sets on our token that are a little bit overpowered, but ours are, as far as the sets for Warlocks go, Destructions are by far the best, and the 2-piece is a little bit more valuable than the 4-piece. So if you can just get that, it's pretty good. You're not going to die if you don't have the 4-piece, but you should try to get that 2-piece as soon as you can.
Yeah, for sure. I think the only problem I really have with the 4-piece, other than what you guys touched on, was that I don't really like, this may just be my opinion, but I don't really like percentage-based things, especially when it's a low percentage. I feel like those mechanics should be RPPM-based, because RPPM is really good with, bad luck prevention, and when you have something that's like a 12% chance, there's a very good chance you won't see that for like a very long time into the fight.
I hate RPPM, man.
I mean, I'm not like the hugest fan of RPPM, but I think it's good for the set bonus type of stuff, especially when it's something that you want to occur like fairly frequently, because it does give you it in the opener. For instance, you get to feel the effects of your set bonus right away, which is nice, and I think that's nice with Trinkets too. And so I think it's good for that kind of thing.
It's a weird back and forth with the RPPM system right now too. And now the RPPM system also has a weird interaction with the crit multi-strike world we live in, where, at least for a burst-oriented class that couples a lot of cooldowns into small windows, I can do, I've broken the 200k window, like, once, and then I've, like, never seen it ever again. Because it's just like, the heavens part, and the thrall shaman green Jesus god comes down and is like, you are blessed, my son. Have 200,000 burst. But then every time like that, I'm like 160k, So
I think even more so for Destruction because of how much harder your Chaos Bolts can hit because of procs is part of why I hate RPPM, because you can go so long, even through Dark Souls sections, where you're not getting any procs, and that's what I really liked about ICD, especially with Trinkets in the past was that with Chaos Bolt, you could line it up, like you had an idea of when it was coming. So in my opinion, it was it was in a way more skill because you had to get ready for that proc to come back with ICD. But now it's just random. You don't know when it's going to come, and you have to react to it. And in a way that takes skill as well. But I think it just really can swing either way based on your luck, where RPPM can actually screw you, or you get good procs and you just obliterate everything.
Yeah, I don't know. That's sort of a swing that I like though in fight design. Like I definitely sort of understand the sentiment behind ICD being, kind of fun to play around. But then for a while in Siege and you're playing with the amp trinket and you start to realize there's a lot of fights where that trinket and the way your guild, the speed stuff gets killed and whatnot, that is gonna proc during an intermission phase or something like Thok, it's chasing.
Of course.
Yeah. That will happen many times in a tier, and then it becomes very frustrating. And I think that RPPM sort of offers this sort of spice up your gameplay. Many players don't like RPPM, and many players like RPPM, so it's a very dividing issue. But it's something that I like because it's different every fight, and you always have it on the pull. Like ICD,
sure,
everyone's got their horror stories on my trinket didn't proc for 40 seconds.
I'm not opposed to ICD. I'm opposed to low proc rate ICDs because specifically for Warlocks, we don't have very high actions per minute. We don't cast many things like other classes do. So when a trinket is 15% chance to proc, we can just not have it proc for an entire minute because of bad luck.
Right.
I think it's nice to have both types. Many different types of trinkets gives you a lot of gameplay variety, and it gives different classes different strengths and weaknesses. So
talking about trinkets, the Fragment of the Dark Star is your Archimon trinket.
It's big for us.
And for at least 2 of the specs.
Yeah.
Maybe. So
mostly just one.
Mostly just one, yeah.
So these are normal values. Affliction gets the reduced duration and period of agony, unstable affliction, and corruption. So it shortens the window they docs tick, so they tick more often in that shorter window. So it increases the damage that they do in the shorter range of time. Demonology, Hand of Gul'dan has a 60.39% chance to summon 3 wild imps. And Destruction, your Incinerate increases the critical strike chance of your spells against that target by 3.40% for 10 seconds up to 5 stacks. So another stacking thing. Again, it ebbs right back into Destruction looking like, that's pretty good.
See, there are some conflicting opinions on the Destruction trinket right now, and I'm under the impression that it's not really that overpowered when you actually look at it. Compared to other specs, it's really the only spec that we have right now with that trinket that can even compete with a lot of the spec single target.
Sure. Okay.
And if they nerf it even a little bit, there's this dilemma where it becomes just useless for anything but single target because it's not good for bursting ads. It doesn't work for AoE, which we found out a couple days ago in the IRC.
Doesn't work with Fire and Brimstone then?
Sorry, I should correct myself. It works for AoE, just not Chaos Bolt. It doesn't. Right. Fire and Brimstone Chaos Bolt does not benefit from it at all. So it doesn't work really doesn't work for
Sad
AoE.
Days.
It doesn't. It doesn't work for bursting ads. It's not that great for a 3-target council type of fight. Okay. So it's got the same kind of syndrome as the Affliction 2-piece, where if they nerf it and try to balance it around Patchwork, it's just not going to be good at all.
And neither is Destro by extension. Yeah. It's very much the power of the spec in a mythic environment, and the desirability of the spec is very much tied to this guy can bring good bursts to the ads and stuff. He has a varied toolkit, but he's going to bring the really strong boss damage as well. And if you sort of take that out of the picture, then Warlock is in a lot weaker place than it is theoretically right now. So
the thing about it is it's 5 stacks that Incinerate can put on the target, and that's 5 to 6 seconds of nothing but Incinerate on the target. So if it's something
that's a considerable amount of haste too.
Yeah, and that's a lot of time that you spend doing that instead of bursting the ad down. You're prepping for the burst on the ad, and that's not efficient.
I think it's in a decent state right now, and if they do nerf it, I really hope that they don't nerf it by much, because if they do, we're just going to end up not using it on any fight that isn't just like Zakoon, where you can just single target the entire time.
Yeah, well, that's what I've heard a lot about these different trinkets, is that they're sort of very situational, obviously. But the thing is, you have to look at these trinkets and the fact that, like, you don't have any passive, secondary stat or int or anything like that, or just a raw spell power proc you can play around with an int trinket or something like that. So, I guess other trinket preference combos, like, what are the other two you would, like, rock on, like, everything if you didn't ever factor in the Archimon trinket? What are the two...
Shadow Moon Insignia, correct? The one from
Shadow Moon Insignia is the front runner for every spec.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it gets a little weird, because our only options are like AoE trinkets and the passive stat trinket, which I think is crit haste, which isn't really good for any of the specs. So we kind of, if you can't get that fragment, you're basically just forced into using one of the two AoE trinkets on a single target, or holding on to your trinkets from last tier. And
or honestly, the Sandman's, right? The Sandman's is quite good.
Sandman's.
The last level Sandman's is up there on the Sims.
It's okay. It doesn't work well with Fragment, particularly because it's a crit proc and you get a bunch of crit for free from Fragment. But
okay.
For Affliction,
just if Fragment was nerfed, I mean, you could run Sandman's.
Sandman's is pretty good. All of the mythic trinkets from last tier are still really good. The alchemy trinket is, if you upgrade it all the way, it's actually pretty comparable to a lot of the trinkets from last tier too. But I think it's pretty safe to say that if you can't get a fragment for whatever reason, Shadow Moon is the clear choice, and then probably Prophecy of Fear off of Manaroth, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it Manaroth? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Prophecy's pretty good for sure.
It's decent for single target. It's easy to play around, and it works for AoE. And we'll probably be using it for AoE anyway. So it's a thing. That's the third option.
How about weapon enchant?
Mastery, flat across the board for every
gems,
spec. Just get mastery.
Mastery
for all enchants on every spec. Just go mastery.
Okay. Yep. For gems and enchants. Okay, that's that easy question right there.
Yeah.
Mastery. And then I'll push the rest of that till later if we have time. Anything else on that stuff before we get out of there? Before the trinket or the set bonus, anything like that? Anything? Good. All right. Good. All right. So I'm gonna plug a couple things real quick here and take a little bit of a show to tell you guys about some communities, some websites, and some other things that you may not have heard about before. Of course, if you haven't already, for whatever reason, if you haven't bookmarked or gone to summonstone.com yet, then I don't know what you're doing with your time. A lot of the 6.2 guides are being updated as we speak. Of course, some of them are still being built and or updated. But you can go to the top bar here and check out which specs have guides. All these are very nice. They're very, very good. They're very clean. They have a ton of information. Also, in our chat, some of our mods or regulars can link you guys to a lot of the huge Google Doc compendiums that FinalBossTV has put together and has linked for your convenience through a lot of the great theory crafters for Enhancement Shaman, for Holy Discipline Priest, for Hunter. There's some great resources just in the chat, literally at the drop of a exclamation command. But go check out Summon Stone if you're looking for updated class guides. These are really in-depth, tons of stuff. Weak aura options, add-ons, rotational things, great stuff on Summon Stone. Additionally, if you are new to combat logging and or are new to raiding or getting back into it with a new group, both the gear optimizer and the combat logs on Ask Mr. Robot are really, really good. If you want to go dive into those, the gear optimizer will armory all of your characters and show you where the best place to put different gear upgrades are on your people, and it's just super simple. The combat logs are very graphical, very user-friendly. They're not just all giant walls of text if you're scared of combat logs. So go check out Ask Mr. Robot's combat logs, of course. Really good stuff up here. They also have estimated data on trinket effects too, sort of built into what you can maybe do with Simcraft, but if you're scared of Simcraft as well, if you're not used to it, then you can use Ask Mr. Robot's tools for that as well. Additionally, if you've missed past episodes of Final Boss TV, we are on our YouTube page. All of our past episodes, all my additional content, all the kill video POVs that I do, I did live commentary and then the rebuttal on the live Q&A that just recently happened. All of our extra shows are all on YouTube. We're also on iTunes and Stitcher. All you gotta do is look up FinalBossTV or look up FinalBoss WoW on either of those. And you can go through all that stuff. You can also type !WOD in chat to get our episode guide, which is a quick little hyperlink Google Doc you can get for all of the class episodes we've done so far. And FinalBossTV, of course, is proud to be sponsored by Loot Crate. You may have heard of Loot Crate. I don't know. It's kind of a big deal. Maybe. I don't know. You get a monthly box of Geek and Gamer stuff sent to your freaking door every month. This next box is called Heroes 2. So it'll feature DC Comics. There's some Batman up here, Link. There's this other elf guy over here, and then, of course, Wonder Woman. But you've got a couple days left, a little bit, 21 days exactly. And down below, we have a link to our promo link that supports the show if you do so, and you can net yourself 10% off your entire subscription. I suggest doing like a 3-month box. That way you get actually a little bang for your buck out of it. But yeah, those are all those good things. I think we're going to talk about talents now. I think it's talent time talking discussion for Warlocks. Let's do this. Let's do this. As chat room catches up, that was obviously a joke. Don't freak out. It was definitely Spock. Come on. They have Spock next to Link, so it's just they're both like elf guys, right? Yeah, one's a space elf, one's a medieval elf. Yeah, of course. Of course. And so I'm going to run through these. Every one of the talents for Warlocks, one changes for level 100, and the other ones are all the same. So Soulburn Haunt is the Affliction change, Demonology has Demon Bolt, and Destruction has Charred Remains. And so what Soulburn Haunt is, you can grab Soulburn Empowerment to your Haunt spell, so you gain an additional 20% damage for 30 seconds for your dots on the target when your Soulburn Haunt is on them. Cataclysm is the same for all specs. You drop a meteor down and you cast you use Shadow Flame damage, but you either put Unstable Affliction and Agony if you're Affliction, you put Corruption if you're Demonology, and you put Immolate if you're Destro. And then Demonic Servitude is you get super powered pets, basically. I mean, that's...
Yep.
You get the new models, though. Those new models, though. Really? New models.
Those cool models, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Demonology's Demon Bolt is an 80 Demonic Fury cast, 2-second cast. It's used during Metamorphosis, where you do tons of the Chaos damages, and then successive casts of Demon Bolt increase its damage and cost for 40 seconds. Reduced by haste, stacking up to 10 times. So super single target craziness in Demon Bolt. Looks pretty cool, too. And then Destruction gets Charred Remains, which is Incinerate and Conflag, deal 50% less damage, but generates 200% more Burning Embers. And Fire and Brimstone now also works on Chaos Bolt, so you can do the AoE Cleave multi-Chaos Bolt cast. So, for Affliction, level 100 talent, like, is it just Soulburn Haunt? And then, like, if there's AoE
pretty much.
Cataclysm? Is that it?
Yeah, but you would never take Cataclysm anyway, because even on the AoE fight, you should either not be playing Affliction, or you should be tunneling into whatever target is the highest priority.
I was going to say, you'd probably just start with not playing Affliction on an AoE fight.
That's the problem with Cataclysm. It's actually pretty, like, Affliction AoE is pretty good. It's just that you lose so much priority damage to use it. It's just never worth it, ever.
Okay.
Soulburn Haunt is just like the best talent all around. Demonic Servitude is kind of okay if you're like moving 90% of the fight, I guess.
Or you have lower gear if you don't have like the haste.
I should preface this by saying across the board, Demonic Servitude is really good for all of the specs and like blue gear beginning players. It's a really good talent to pick up. But from a raw output, it's just Soulburn. Just take Soulburn. Sure.
I concur.
Furty concurs. All right, good.
Good. Good.
Stamp of approval, dude.
Demonology, then, as again, you've obviously blanketed the Demonic Servitude comment. Demon Bolt everything, or
no?
You could play Kata.
Demo is. I would say Demo has the most balanced 100 tier of any of the specs, and it was probably a little bit more balanced last tier, I think. But right now, for most of the fights, it's Demon Bolt, just because all of the AoE is pretty trivial to actually killing things.
Right.
Cataclysm is really amazing for like AoE and burst AoE, but that's just not a thing in Hellfire Citadel.
Sure.
Demonic Servitude is actually really, really, really close for Demo, particularly when you have the 2-piece, because more damage from pets, better 2-piece. But it's just slightly behind. So if there's a fight with like a lot of movement, it's a decent option, but you can usually play around movement if you're a more experienced player and just like, use Touch of Chaos.
Okay.
It's also a question of niches, right? Like Demon Bolt's got an awesome niche, which is like, wow, I'm a powerhouse for like 10 seconds. I can deal like an obscene, like more than 1 million damage in less than 8 seconds to something. And then sort of Serve has a bit of a tamer niche, but it's still quite good. You have very strong execute, and it's hard to beat a Serve execute Warlock on a long execute kind of fight. So yeah, they have different niches, and you have to sort of evaluate that too. When you're considering dropping Demon Bolt, you have to be like, wow, well, this thing can crush ads, and it can, when we have to push the boss, it can do that really well. So it's quite a strong niche, even if it's not the best option on numerically. I mean, so
sure, okay. I'll bounce over to Destruction then, real quick. Charred Remains is the flip-flop again for that. How does Destruction fail in this tier? I would imagine almost Demonic Servitude probably dies because I think...
Yeah. As soon as you get just a little bit of mastery on gear, Charred Remains is just way better single target, and it's also better at essentially everything, so there's not really a reason to ever use any of the other talents.
Essentially everything. Okay.
Demonic Servitude, like Destruction, doesn't have Touch of Chaos and things it can do on the move, so it's not horrible for like a fight with decent movement like it is for the other specs, but it most of the time is Charred Remains on every fight in the tier. It has amazing AoE, amazing burst, amazing single target. It's
really
versatile.
It's a
little bit too good at all of the things.
So then,
yeah. I would actually almost argue that CR is so good that if there was a fight that had so much movement that you literally could not get by with just your portal or a good movement play, then I would almost argue that CR with KJC is better than service with AD on with good gear. Basically with top level gear.
We can jump ahead of KJC right now. It's
well,
a
that's what I was
bit
going to do. I want to stay on Destruction. We're going to go back up the tier now from Destruction for other talents. So obviously, what's weird too is you see like the talent laid out for different classes. So 90 and 75 are your other DPS-oriented tiers. So what does Destruction do in this? Like, do you have a different spec you can play with the different grimoires and different demon ability? What do you...
Grimoires are pretty straightforward. You just take sacrifice all of the time whenever you're playing Destruction because Charred Remains, 80% of your damage is Chaos Bolt. Grimoire of Sacrifice, 25% more Chaos Bolt damage. It's a pretty solid deal there. I mean, the pet does like 5% of my whatever.
There's no different. You don't have to sacrifice a certain pet anymore, do you? You just any of them?
Well, I would
usually do Voidwalker or the
Voidwalker is really good for the personal CDs, and Fellhunter gives you an interrupt, but those are
good.
That's the only real difference. Generally, just Voidwalker, the best one to use.
Okay.
Gets you a nice 30. Is it? Wait, no, it's 20, right? 20% health. I don't even remember. It's just like you get a big health puff.
Okay.
Yeah. You basically become unkillable. Like if you're in 700 eye level, you're gonna go up to like 700k health.
I did some math last year, and if I went with all of the best defensive talents, I could have like it was 4.2 million effective health pool, give or take. Just like 4.2 million, just a little bit.
Then you have to consider also stacked with Soul Link. That's even more health.
Of course, yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. They fixed the Soul Link thing with Sacrifice, right?
Sacrifice? I'm pretty sure they did, yeah.
Yes, they did.
There was a thing in previous tiers where if you used Soul Link and then sacrificed your pet, the way they do that is you get a health buff because you no longer have a pet, so Soul Link is, it's useless.
But then you would take 20% less damage.
So then you change talent from Soul Link to Sacrificial Pact, and you would retain the health buff even though you no longer have the talent equipped.
Yeah.
So we basically just had a permanent 20% health or whatever.
Okay.
But they fixed that, I'm pretty sure.
So then what else? How about 90 then for destruction? Is this like does this swap around between the different demons or no?
Mostly you're always just going to use 80 for all of the specs.
Oh, okay.
Destruction in particular, there is more leeway with like using Glyph of Dark Soul to, have Dark Soul up more often so you don't need 80 as much.
Okay.
And you also are really reliant on movement as destruction. So if there's a fight with a lot of movement, Kill Jaden's isn't that bad. Really, it really isn't mathematically that bad at all. It's just 80 lets you control where Dark Soul comes up, and that's really good for like fight timers. But the other specs, like for Affliction, there's like your dots do like 50% of your damage anyway, so you're doing pretty good damage while you're moving. And Demonology doesn't really lose any. We have Touch of Chaos. That Touch of Chaos essentially just makes Kill Jaden's Cunning useless for Demo. And then Manaroth is a sore topic because it's just been terrible since, like, I think the last time it was good was like tier 15 destruction. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was good in tier 16. It was good in Siege.
It was the best talent in High Mall until they nerfed Rain of Fire.
Yeah, until they nerfed Rain of Fire. That's what I was wondering.
I remember that fun stuff. Manaroth, Rain of Fire, single target.
Yeah.
I was the one that did that.
Yeah. See, the thing about just Destro and other talent options in Glyph of Dark Soul and KJC is that Dark Soul is the least important for Destro of the three specs. Like when you're playing CR, it has the smallest effect. It's not like this huge burst of damage as it is for Demo, where you're doing like 40% of your damage inside your cooldowns and stuff. It's a little bit tamer of a cooldown compared to the other two specs. So it's okay to sacrifice an extra charge if you absolutely have to. If you don't, then you should keep that extra charge for, like Gahddo said, for control. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a little bit more room to play around with Dark Soul modifier glyph and with KJC and
Last thing that I wanted to touch on that tree was the Manaroth's Fury. It's pretty terrible for destruction because it only buffs Rain of Fire, and we discussed earlier that's terrible now. But it actually got an indirect buff for Demonology this tier because the Mastery buff in tier 17 best in slot increased immolation aura damage by about 25% compared to last tier. It's really not that terrible for burst AoE. It's just that niche doesn't exist in this raid at all. I think if they had done that last tier, we very well might have been using Manaroth on a few fights just to like burst ads down real quick. But
okay. So I guess then the other specs, does like Demonology, I would assume you don't take Grimoire of Sacrifice, correct? What Grimoire?
No. Well, they have it. They have it different. It's Grimoire of Synergy.
Synergy, exactly.
Synergy. Which is what you'd be taking with Demon Bolt if you ever were playing Demon Bolt.
That's an iffy topic because for Demon Bolt, all three of them are really, really balanced single target. It really doesn't make any difference on single target which you take for Demo. Synergy is better for AoE, which is why it's usually the default, because more targets, more percentage of your damage comes from you than pets. So it just
I also think it feels the best, like for Demon Bolt. Like even if numerically, even if they're all pretty similar, it feels nice to have an extra proc to play with Demon Bolt. It's it feels more
and it procs so often.
Yeah, exactly. You have a very high uptime on it, and it helps with your Demon Bolt burst. Actually, like if you're trying to excel in that niche, it's going to be better at that 10-second burst than, say, Supremacy would be. So yeah, I mean, you can really choose whatever you want, but Synergy is a very common choice for a few reasons.
Right. Okay.
I just need like 2 seconds. I'll be right back.
That's fine.
Saying goodbye to my grandfather.
You're good. So I guess then in Affliction, is there? I mean, you take Soulburn Haunt. I assume you take Archimon's Darkness with Affliction as well. And which Grimoire works? Because you have Sacrifice again for Affliction.
Furty would know a little bit more about this probably right now than I would, but Sacrifice single target isn't awful as Affliction right now, is it?
It's actually the best. If you can have a very high uptime of Drain Soul, then it's really, really good. But if you don't, then it's gonna be within like 2%.
The thing with Sacrifice of Reflection is that it really did look really good back when the set was OP because you were just drain souling all the time. But when they nerfed it, it really lost most of the power that it had, and it's about even with the other talent single target right now. But it just doesn't really work too well for movement, and it doesn't work for multi-target at all. So it's in a weird place. It's not a bad talent. It's just Supremacy's probably better overall.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's some. I guess the weird thing about Warlock talents is because so much Warlock stuff just comes from like your kit.
Yeah.
You don't really get a lot of change because I mean, Archimon Dark Soul obviously give you 2 charges of Dark Soul, but Kill Dangerous Cut just means you can move and cast. Which, directly looking at this, unless the fight requires you to move a lot, then like, why would you not take just more damage from Archimon's Darkness? And again, as AoE has changed and as Rain of Fire for Destruction is no longer like a big deal, Menoros Fury just
Probably the only fight in Hellfire I'd probably consider taking KJC is probably Cormrock. That's probably the only one.
Oh yeah, I mean, dodge those Skittles.
I feel like the extra DS on Archimon is probably more valuable than the movement, but you could probably go KJC and Archimon, but I would go AD.
Yeah, personally, I don't think I would take KJC on anything.
No, I never will.
Yeah, it's definitely like has applications if you find yourself struggling. But honestly, like I encourage most Warlocks out there, if you are struggling, to really take a look at how you plan your cooldowns, and if you're using your demonic circle often, because you can really use that kind of stuff. If you're using gateways, a lot of Warlocks don't put down gateways. Fight to fight. I mean, there's so many times where it's just like you're in a bad spot and you're like in a mechanic and you maybe waited a little bit too long to get out of it and you wish you were anywhere but there. It could be anywhere in the room. And if you have maybe that's someone else too, if they have a gateway right next to them, like they're going to love you forever. Or if you have your demonic circle, you just port right out. Like there's so many ways that you can take advantage of those two abilities that, they're not necessarily OP or like required, but they'll give you a lot of room to play with. So you'll find that AT is a lot more bearable and usable if you take advantage of that stuff often.
Sure. No, absolutely. It's just a weird talent tier because one, like, realistically just gives you more damage, and then one is, like, damage on the move, which is, I guess more damage if you have to move a lot, but then not really actually, it's not just, like, flat damage. It's just a weird talent tier, I suppose.
I think most Warlocks would agree that 2 out of those 3 talents need some sort of overhaul.
Right.
Yeah.
But I just really don't want to say nuke the... I don't want to tell them, like, shake up the tier, because then they might change Archimons, and that would make me really sad, because that's, like, one of my favorite talents in the game. But wrapping up the talent stuff, I did want to note one more thing. If you're taking Demonic Servitude as your 100 talent, for whatever reason you decide to use it, you should always use Grimoire of Service for any spec. It's the only way that Demonic Servitude is a good talent.
Oh, wow. So because, I mean, Grimoire... So
it's a lot of weird math, because we have a passive Doomguard inherently without taking the talent, and Service is just better than Supremacy for the specs because of Dark Souls. Just in general, if you're using Demonic Servitude, always take Grimoire of Service for every spec.
Because that means the demon that you actually summoned is stronger as well?
Yeah, you duplicate the Doomguard or the Inferno that you summon. So
for 25 seconds. Okay.
You get double Doomguard, and it's pretty amazing.
Right. Okay. So never just take Servitude or Service without the other one, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Service has some use for like Demo AoE, but generally just Service and Demonic Servitude go together. Otherwise, they don't really have a reason.
Okay. All right, last couple of bits we have here before we can soapbox for a little while. Any glyphs of note that need to be brought up that are really important for any of the specs in particular?
Yes.
If you're playing Demon Bolt demo, you're playing
Glyph
Demon
of Dark Soul.
Demon Bolt demo, Glyph of Dark Soul. Or Cataclysm.
I think it's not just for that either, and people really undervalue its usage for destruction, but it's kind of just like, for Demon Bolt, you should always have Glyph of Dark Soul. Always. That's what makes Dark Soul Demon Bolt really good. But for destruction, if a fight has like a lot of adds that happen really periodically that you need to nuke down constantly, the glyph is really a good option because you get it every minute for half the duration instead of 2 minutes for the full duration.
I feel like the damage you lose on the boss, though, generally speaking, is more valuable than that AoE because of other classes' ability to passively take care of AoE, where you will lose a fair amount of single target damage when you have to do that.
It's just one of those things where it's always a consideration in the back of your mind when you go into a fight. Is this glyph going to be good on this fight based on like fight timers and damage stuff? But
what kind of damage you need in your raid?
I think some of the more noteworthy glyphs are actually the bad ones that you know, I'd like to caution Warlocks to steer away from.
Sure.
One of them is Glyph of Havoc. That glyph is really bad. Please never use that glyph. That glyph basically adds 30 seconds to your Havoc cooldown so that you get double the charges.
Is it actually
but there's another way...
Glyph of Havoc? What's it called?
Yeah, it is.
It's Glyph of Havoc.
And there's another way you can get the same effect, and it's just by applying Havoc early, because Havoc's duration of the buff and also the cooldown is the exact same. So you can apply Havoc 10 seconds before an ad comes out. As soon as the ad lands, you Chaos Bolt. 2 seconds later, you apply another Havoc and Chaos Bolt again. You know, presto, you've got a free Havoc glyph, and you don't have the increased cooldown. Ooh. And then the other one is Glyph of Demon Training. Now, that glyph is really good for Demo if you're playing Sacrificial Pact, because it increases your Felguard's HP pool, and it gives you a bigger shield. But it also stipulates that the imp fires like in bursts of 3 or something, and increases. I don't know. I can't remember what it says, but a lot of people
it fires in bursts of 3, but it costs the same amount of resource for the pet, so it does the same damage either way. You're not gaining any damage from it. It just
people
happens
look at it and they think that it's like
bursts.
a secret. Yeah, but it's definitely a trap glyph. Don't get confused by that. It just means that the pet is using energy faster, so it has to sit there and wait for its energy to regen.
Okay.
Then I would highly recommend every Warlock going into every fight to look at your unending resolve glyphs and just like think about which one is going to be the best. We have 3 of them. One makes it a passive 10%. One reduces the cooldown by a minute but makes it a 20% damage reduction. One increases the cooldown, but like makes it. I don't even remember.
I think it gives it 20% more. I think it's just opposite.
Yeah, it's the opposite of the shorter one. So you get to choose between the normal one, a passive one, and then either shorter cooldown weaker or longer cooldown stronger. And the one that makes it a longer cooldown for a bigger damage reduction is actually really good on a couple fights to like soak mechanics that you otherwise would have no business soaking on a Warlock.
Okay.
Ones that I find useful that I most often use throughout Hellfire Citadel is the Glyph of Soulstone. I use that quite often. Eternal Resolve, which is your 10% passive one. I can't really think of a situation where you'd need to get rid of that. And for me, usually the Glyph of your Demonic Circle, just to lower the cooldown on that, because I use it on a lot of fights.
We have multiple druids in the raid, so Soulstone does it. I very rarely have to use it, so I usually
use it
just
the fight.
Yeah, same.
I usually just replace that glyph with Siphon Life. I think it is the 0.5% one.
So wait, does that work if you what Furty just said? Does that work if you glyph of Soulstone and then Soulstone your tank and then unglyph with a Soulstone? Does it still give the tank 100% HP?
It doesn't. I actually tested that on PTR. But,
okay, that's what I wanted to confirm. Okay, cool.
But I still like to use that glyph because in Mythic there's a lot of situations where I find at the end of the fight it's like, whoa, both tanks are down. Get one of them up. Get them up, and then it just gets bludgeoned instantly by the boss. And
right, of course.
If you have a Soulstone sitting on your main tank. That he comes up at 100% health. There's no chance of that happening.
Yeah.
Also, Siphon Life is definitely a good option there if you're not going to take it. It's just it gives you a surprising amount of passive healing, particularly for AOE fights, because it just scales up with number of targets. But
okay, a lot of glyph choices actually. It's like ridiculous. You guys like
a decent number.
Sometimes I get like you pick these 2 and then 1 optional. At least there's some wiggle room there. That's not too bad.
There's
Talent's
another one.
Not so much.
There's another one that kind of goes into something in like the wrap up section with like tips and tricks that most people haven't figured out yet. But if you talent Drain Life for Demonology and run the glyph that doubles the healing, it actually does approximately the same DPS as using Shadow Bolt. mathematically, it's just the same thing. Drain Life as a filler with the 50% damage talent does the same damage as Shadow Bolt, give or take. So
for what spec though?
Demo
for demonology.
I wouldn't really ever recommend using the glyph because I feel there are better glyphs to use there.
Right.
But definitely taking that talent can be interesting on a fight with like a lot of sustained damage because you don't lose any DPS for using Drain Life as demo.
Well, yeah, you just brought us right into the soapbox time. So, Furty, what do you got? Soapbox it? You want tips and tricks, lesser things, tips for Warlocks? As you're probably doing trash right now, or a boss, I'm sure.
I'm actually doing Manaroth right now. We're in stage
Let's let him go last, though, dude. He's almost done with it.
Okay, yeah. So Pyromancer, you go first, buddy. Pyro, go first.
Especially since we're playing Destructional at this tier, my biggest tip that I would probably give to newer Destruction Warlocks is making good use of your Havoc. Havoc's a really, really essential tool in cleaving on fights. Shadowburn cleaving, so getting boss damage while also regenerating more embers to get more boss damage. Just really get good at using your Havoc and recognize all the type of situations where it's useful, and that's a really big thing for a lot of new Warlocks.
All right, sounds good. Gahddo, what you got, sir?
To compound on that, I think a lot of people tunnel on like reacting to procs and using Dark Soul perfectly on single targets, but usually the difference between like 95th percentile Warlocks and 80th percentile or whatever, just good Warlocks is how they handle fight timers with Havoc and Dark Soul in particular. And just learning how to snipe Shadowburn. Just snipe all of the Shadowburn you can, and you'll do really well.
I've heard this before, yeah. Shadowburn is definitely this
Shadowburn.
Yeah.
Having 3 Destro locks sucks when you're trying to do that, man, because all of them are trying to do it. And you're just like, well,
Shadowburn. Yeah.
Missed that Shadowburn, okay.
Oh, damn it.
Yep. It happens.
All right, we're back around to you now, Furty. Hopefully it's dead, or you could talk while dodging the...
I'm a good multitasker. I think that the things that make players good are just sort of fundamentals. Usually it comes down to like using every global. Talked about Demonic Circle, like making use of movement abilities to their maximum effect, giving yourself time, giving yourself space. I honestly think the global point is huge. There's a lot of players who don't fill every global. There's like a little bit of pause in between, or they try and think about what's the next thing in my opener or something like that, and then you add those pauses up over fights, like maybe 20 or 30 lost globals, and that's gigantic. Like other stuff, using abilities on cooldown. Havoc's a big one if we're talking about Destruction, right? Destruction being sort of our primary spec this tier.
Right.
Even if you don't have the Embers for Havoc or the target isn't out yet, I talked about the pre-Havoc. Like just put Havoc on your target and then you can generate Embers, and when you have what you need or when a proc occurs, then you can switch to the other target and cast the Chaos Bolt. Like you can wait for procs with Havoc. Like as long as you apply it on cooldown, then you're in a great situation. So just stuff like that. Look for ways to take advantage of the way the game works, basically, because there's a lot of ways that you on specific fights. I'm really drawing a blank on like something that I can tell you that is like mind blowing, but I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can just be like, okay, my circle, I can use it to completely dodge like this entire mechanic. Like on Vulgar, you could port through the Deforesters on Mythic, stuff like that. Like save your healers. There's just lots and lots of things that can distinguish you as a player, especially on the movement component of the caster skill cap. So really look for ways to take advantage of that.
Going back to the using Havoc on cooldown thing, a lot of people don't actually know this, but Havoc has a bit of special coding on it. It triggers a half-second global. So if you use it, it's a half-second. It's not even a global. It's a third of a global. So you're not really going to get punished for using it constantly.
Because Destruction actually has a one second.
Yeah, it's one. DCD. Destruction has a 1 second global default, but for people coming from other specs, it's
for sure
half a second. It's really short.
Right. Gotcha.
And one other thing I wanted to talk about, Demon Bolt. People really, really tunnel on like always getting it with procs or always using it with Dark Soul. if the debuff falls off and you have a lot of demonic fury, just throw it out.
Demon Bolt, just do it.
Just throw it out. It's going to do a lot of damage without procs, and you sitting there waiting for a proc can mean you lose 1, maybe 2 cycles throughout the fight, and then you lose 1,000,000 damage right there.
Yeah, then it's gone forever. Yeah.
Just try to use Demon Bolt very often.
There you go. All right, gentlemen, that's going to have to do it for us. It is definitely going to be button time, and there is the button. Thank you all very much for tuning in to episode number 86 of Final Boss TV, your Wild and Gay Radio show for Warlocks today. There'll be no main after show, but of course you can find these 3 gentlemen on the internet, and I will tell you where right now. So you can go find Pyromancer. Thanks for going on the show for your first time, Pyro. Appreciate it, buddy. Yep. Pyromancer Sarge, for Sargeris. You can find him on Twitter, ask him questions, right? They can ask you questions on Twitter, I hope, maybe.
Yep, or my YouTube too, if you have that one.
That works. That works.
Yep.
Your YouTube can be plugged on your Twitter. I can only put so much.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all good.
So appreciate that, sir. It was awesome. We also had Gahddo was on the show too. You can go follow him on Twitter at the same name. You can go ask him about mathy stuff and tell him to update SimC faster and stop slacking off or whatever. You know. Thank you, sir. It was awesome. Thank you for being on the show. And then we had Furty, who was literally rating at the same time as on the show because, you know, get good, as chat room said.
Damn.
You can go follow Furty at Furty IRL on Twitter as well. Good luck in the upcoming race, sir. Have fun with your 34 splits you just done.
Thanks, man. It's been a long, stressful ride through the heroic week, but I'm really looking forward to Mythic Week, and good luck to all the other guilds out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I got my pom-poms for Midwinter, man. Get in there. Looking forward to it.
Send me a pic, dude.
Of me and the pom-pom? Yeah, okay. Next week, of course, on the show, we're going to talk about Windwalker Monks. Details on who's coming on the show on social media, on Facebook and Twitter. Links down below the stream if you want to follow us on there. If you have questions for Windwalker Monks, send them in. Like right now, the Ask a Boss button is right down there, as well as all of our affiliate links and all of our cool stuff. So thank you very much for watching. Trust in your, is it called the Seal of Inevitable Fate now? I don't like saying that at all.
And your inevitable fate is that you get gold, so...
Exactly. So trust in your gold, have fun at Hellfire Citadel, root for your guild on the Mythic Reset coming up here on Tuesday. And until next week, everybody, bye! Bye! Wave bye to the nice people! Wave bye! Wave bye! There you go! See, look at that! Wow, that was pretty good. Man. Woo! That was good.